Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another special episode of I Beg to Differ, where we have fun and informative conversations with Asian American filmmakers and executives to hear their views and perspectives on Asian representation in Hollywood and their advice for college students trying to break into the industry. We are so honored to be joined today by Ms. Jenny Lynn. Jenny is an acclaimed writer who worked on many popular series, including Mayans, Iron Fist, Spinning Out, and Arrow. Jenny, thank you so much again for joining us today. It's such an honor and pleasure.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is so exciting because things like this were not around when I was at Duke. So I'm so jealous, but happy to help.
Always happy to see the Duke film community improving. So I know many of the shows you write, especially shows like Iron Fist, are not only extremely popular, but also tell unique stories with elements of Asian cultures, almost like a combination of the East and West. So as an Asian American yourself, how do you express your voice and perspective in these popular shows? And where do you see the Asian American representation in the overall industry going on in the future?
Oh, such big questions. Well, let's see. The first one was for the ones, these were shows that were already in existence, and then I got hired on to join the staffs for them. So in terms of that, obviously, I'm sure like my background had was of interest to them because on Arrow, it had a Eastern flavor to it. I think the main character drops onto this mystical Chinese island, and the show is infused with some martial arts elements because he uses a green arrow to, he's a vigilante, he uses a green arrow. So that was Arrow. And then for Iron Fist, it was also a comic book that had been created in the 1970s. And then there was a reboot recently. And so they obviously, because it took place in New York, Chinatown, there were going to be many more Asian American characters, including the main lead, Colleen Wing, I think it was her character. And so they obviously wanted a voice in the room to represent that. So those were things that were already in the mix that I was asked to bring my perspective and my background into it. And then in terms of where we are today, frankly, it's been really exciting. I would say like in an unfortunate situation where we have all this racial injustice that we've been seeing, and even more so, and it is now being brought to light in the past year, that it has really sparked a conversation around Hollywood. I'm hopeful that this is something that is now not going to go away very easily. But it also means in the rest of us in the BIPOC community have really put pressure on Hollywood to remember that, you know, there's still the rest of us and we have stories to tell. And so I think you happen to have caught us at a moment where Hollywood is very much taking notice. There are initiatives in terms of diversity in the room, on crews, and there's also this very big push in terms of creating content that is created by BIPOC creators who are also then able to tell their own stories, as opposed to, you know, someone not from the community and then trying to just borrow voices to make sure it's authentic. So we can talk even more about that, but I feel like I'll let you ask some more specific questions.
I love the whole topic about Asian American representation because as an Asian American myself who really seeks to become this overall effort of increasing representation, I really appreciate works that filmmakers like you are doing to pushing the industry to actually increase the representation. So one of the questions that I had is that when you write your projects, I know you have a lot of projects that you're working on right now. How do you know which types of ideas can really best increase Asian representation? And which are some of the ideas or topics that we should avoid when we're writing these kind of projects?
Yeah, no, that's, oh, you're asking such great and I would say challenging questions, but in a really good way. I feel like all of us should be thinking about these things all the time. I would say for the first part of that, which is in creating, it's always top of mind. So, well, I would say sometimes there are things that I do want it to be about our cultural identity. So I have a few projects that are so very specifically about that, because I feel like there have been few projects, you know, like the Crazy Rich Asian or Better Luck Tomorrow, um, but they're so few and far between. And I think the more projects that are being made, the more specific that we can be. I think the difficulty has been when there are so few of them that each one has to represent all things to all people. And that's so hard for like so many reasons, nor should any one project have to represent everything to all people, right? And I think this is one of the things is not only do we create something that is interesting, and I think in specificity, you do find a general universality to it. And I think that's definitely a debate that people have been having for a while where they feel like, oh, you've got to do something, but it's got to be able to translate to so and so or dumb it down or make it more general. Where I think people are starting to realize with movies like Minari, you know, the more specific it is, it really talks to a certain kind of humanity that it doesn't matter where you're from, it's just going to hit you at the heart. So, so yeah, I'm really excited to be part of that movement. And then in terms of things to avoid, that, you know, that might actually just be part of my answer too, that and I wouldn't just put it all on creators, right? Like our decision makers, our gatekeepers, it's so important for them to know this as well, where you know, authenticity, when you're writing your thing, I almost want to say you don't want to overthink it to like, oh my God, I have to, you know, reach out to so and so and so and so. It's what are you trying to say? What are you trying to say about the human experience? And then that will hopefully translate to, if you like it, if it calls to your heart, that it will speak to somebody. Does that?
Yeah, that's such a great answer. And I completely agree, like 200% on everything you've said there. I think it's so important that we are, when you talked about universality, that really moved me because I actually grew up in Beijing, China until I was 14. Then I moved here. And movies was one of the first sort of my education on American culture, is how I made friends here. And I really agree that, you know, the same movie, when you release it to different countries, really attracts different people, sometimes for even different reasons, to be excited about the same thing. And I know that a lot of Hollywood companies and studios and a lot of filmmakers trying to find that key into speaking these universal stories that can really appeal to everyone. So I guess one of the questions, which I think we have kind of addressed before, is that do you really think there's a key to appeal to audiences from drastically different cultures and backgrounds? Or do you think it really reflects on what the filmmaker, what the creators, like them speaking their hearts and their experiences?
The latter. It's definitely the latter. I always worry about trying to write towards a market in general. And this isn't even speaking about like whether or not something is going to translate universally. You know, some years, you know, action thrillers might be more in vogue, and then other years it might be the romantic comedy. And I know, just you look at, you know, decades of work, and there are some people who are trying to chase after, oh, what do people want? Whereas I think, you know, regardless of genre, regardless of subject matter, it's always the one that you know, it was something that the creator was willing to bleed over, something that they really had to say. Those are the things that catch on. And I will say then, you know, I would carry that same idea to anything that has, whether you're an Asian American creator, you're exactly what you're writing happens to be about Asian Americans, I would, you know, carry that same idea over. You just, you know, speak from the heart, tell it with authenticity and specificity. And, you know, that's the thing that will make it unique. And that's the thing that will hopefully, grab somebody's attention.
That makes so much sense. And we have a lot of student writers here at Duke. So we just hosted our Duke Independent Film Festival over Zoom not long ago. And we saw a lot of diverse storytelling. And that's something we really loved. A question that a lot of students had is that sometimes it's hard to find stories in daily lives or really good ideas that they think they can develop into scripts and to movies that they make by themselves. So as someone who has written so many amazing projects that, if you say it to anyone, they'll get excited about, what would be some of your recommendations to students and also rising filmmakers about how to find these ideas, how to find these meaningful stories in their daily lives?
Oh, yeah, everywhere. I would say definitely read material, find material, because oftentimes, and it doesn't always have to be exactly that, right? Like it may be you're reading a news article and all of a sudden it sparks something and then your brain, takes it and runs with it. I would say it's it's a combination of finding things outside of yourself. And then it's also internal work too. And then one of the things that I love to do in the early stages, whether it's, oh, is there a kernel of, an idea here, whatever, is just, your core group of friends, your other storytellers and filmmakers, you talk it out. You tell the story, you keep telling the story until it feels like it's something. And that's how you kind of just vibe whether or not there's a kernel of an idea. I can't tell you how many times in doing that, my friends, your supportive ones, those are the ones that will really be like, yeah, that's the one.
It's so nice to see that there are meaningful stories everywhere that people can tell. And essentially, I've heard something that says your life is a story and every part of your life's a story. And I think maybe just investigating that, like you said, truly reflecting who you are is perhaps the most interesting and important thing that people can explore. So generally into students who are trying to break into Hollywood, I know that we're in a pandemic and that there are not a lot of job opportunities, and a lot of students are asking the same question: how can I break into the industry during these hard times? And what would be your advice to some of those students who are struggling to find their way?
Right. Oh, before I answer that question, I just had another thought about where else to find ideas. I think it may have been like Ray Bradbury or something like who had mentioned where it's like, what's the thing that really pisses you off, or like, what's the thing that you really absolutely fall in love with? Those are also really great internal questions that can be kernels of ideas. I love the what pisses you off, because that's the thing that'll get you really passionate about something. And that's like inherent drama right there. But in terms of your next question about how to break in, especially when, it's like when you have now internships and you're not really, going into an office and meeting everybody in person. I'm assuming that's sort of what you're gathering, what your question is kind of alluding to now that we're having to be distanced a little bit. Um, I think some companies are looking for interns, right? And what's been interesting is even in the television space, what I've been hearing is the TV writers' room, which is normally physically an office space with all your other fellow writers. I know certain shows now, they're even able to find some writers that are on the East Coast or in Europe or in South America now, just because it's online. And so that's all of a sudden opened the doors to, whereas, before there, all of the writers, most of the writers have to be in LA. So that is definitely something that is open. We'll see if it continues. I have a feeling there are certain shows that will lend itself to that, whether it's a show that has international elements and they're going to want people from China or from South America. So that's definitely an opportunity. I know when I was coming up in the industry, when I was doing internships, so much of it was reading and doing coverage, which I know you're doing too, Harry. So, and I think that can be done anywhere. So I think it's just finding, there's so many job blogs. I wish I knew what their names were off of the top of top of my head, but I'm hoping that's a resource that you're able to give people too. But yeah, when I was looking for internships, to be honest with you, I kind of cold called and emailed people. I would just go to all my favorite films and just see who made them. So when I was coming up, I interned for Jodie Foster's company because I thought her sensibility was so incredibly smart. And so I was like, why don't I just reach out to Jodie Foster's company and see if they need somebody? And sure enough, they did. So I got my start there. I loved the Donner movies, these big budget like Hollywood things. So I also reached out to them and they said, sure, come and be an intern. So yeah, I think people are always looking for young and new talent. And I want to, again, diversity and inclusion has been such a huge topic in Hollywood. I think for those of us who are Asian American, I think that's absolutely a bonus.
Yeah, and that's really encouraging message to not just Asian American filmmakers here at Duke, but also students from traditionally underrepresented communities that were not very well represented in Hollywood before. That is such good advice and encouragement, and I hope that they can feel very encouraged after hearing what you have to say as a really, really successful insider. And lastly, a lot of students here, aside from doing internships and finding work, they're also doing a lot of activism and really using film as a medium for activism on campus. And they're looking for ways to do that and to be part of the progress on a campus setting. So what would you recommend that Duke students do now on the Duke campus to become part of this larger process?
I think exactly what you just said. I was thinking, like, when I was there, was it just eons ago, there was just free water and that was it. And we had like four 16mm Bolex cameras and we were fighting over it. That's literally all we had. But these days, you guys have the iPhone, like, and the Android for that matter. You guys have you have video equipment with you at all times. So this is, go grab it, go grab the story and make something of it. I feel like the society, we're relying on each other we can't be everywhere at every time. So I love this idea that some of us, we can pay into the system in a sense, like we can pay it back into our society this way. I think so many young people are asking me about, oh, advice, how do I get ahead and that kind of thing. And I want to say, so many people that, whether it's my peers or the people coming up, the ones who really understand this to be a community, that we're not just, it's all about me and my personal glory and me being like the big fancy auteur, but that it's a collective dialogue, it's a social dialogue that we're a part of. So yeah, bring something that we need.
Yeah, it's so true that working together with other people as a community is really important. And I hope that our students can continue doing that. If this year's festival showed us anything, is that even during a pandemic, students are not only still making films, but also working together to create meaningful stories that make differences to people and communities around us. Jenny, thank you so, so much again for joining us. And thank you everyone for tuning in to another special episode of I Beg to Differ. You can support our channel by liking and sharing this video and subscribing. You can also like our Facebook and Instagram pages to learn more. We'll see you next time in another episode.
Thank you.